Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for being here. Everybody having a great week at reInvent so far? Yeah? We're hospitality people. We can do better than that, right? Having a good week at reInvent? There we go. Thanks, Heidi, for leading the charge there. My name is Greg Land. I'm the global industry leader for AWS for accommodation, lodging, casino, and cruise. So all the really fun stuff within travel and hospitality, right? So we wanted to bring to you these two stories today from customers that really, I think, will resonate with most everybody in the audience. We've got one customer, a very mature company, comes from a legacy technology environment that made that long journey of migration. And then the other story is from a customer who's really a digital native, much younger customer that kind of took a different path, but they've both ended up in the same place as far as their objectives, at a point where they're fully migrated to AWS and they're using all AWS services and solutions to build their own applications. So I can't wait to bring those stories to you today. But real quickly, I just want to start with a quick video. For those of you that maybe haven't worked as closely with us, just a quick 2-minute video to demonstrate kind of what we do across all of travel and hospitality.
More than ever, we feel how valuable it is to share a meal with loved ones, to meet face-to-face with colleagues, and to travel to new and favorite destinations. AWS and its travel and hospitality competency partners are here to help businesses provide an enhanced customer experience on every step of the journey. This is done with industry-specific solutions that make operations more seamless and customer experiences more connected and personalized. Hospitality and travel companies of any size and across every segment of the industry can leverage these technologies. Utilizing IoT sensors and computer vision, AWS can connect offline systems and devices to the cloud. This helps by unlocking siloed data and providing a centralized view of operations. These technologies can also help create new convenient services, like just walk out shopping for quick purchases while customers are on the go. Using cloud-based technologies to collect and analyze data can provide valuable insights about traveler and guest preferences to help businesses provide a personalized experience for every customer they serve. With better customer data and personalized messaging, AWS helps create connected experiences that increase travel and guest engagement and build customer loyalty. AWS also helps businesses provide customer assistance anytime, anywhere, with centralized cloud-based contact centers at the gate, in the car, at the hotel, or at home. Talk with one of our experts today or visit our website to learn more about how AWS can help transform and modernize your operations for a traveler and guest experience that goes above and beyond today's travel and hospitality expectations.
Okay, so I think for a variety of reasons, we've all been looking to accelerate our digital transformation, which includes this whole journey around migration and modernization to get to that point where we can really innovate as quickly as possible for our businesses. And I think over the last 3 or 4 years, for a variety of reasons, we all realized we're not as elastic and resilient as we thought we were. And so both on the IT side of the house and the line of business side of the house, a lot of this is all in the name of becoming more elastic and more resilient. I think the bigger area, though, is around business transformation, whether it's transforming the guest experience, the passenger experience, the employee experience, the franchisee experience. It's also about innovating more quickly in the name of that type of transformation as well. But then lastly, it's all about really being in a position where we can reinvent and innovate for our businesses and for our customers much more quickly, much more securely, and finally with the data to really drive that hyper-personalized experience that we've talked about for 20 years across hospitality. So with that, I want to turn to these two companies we're going to talk about today. The first one is Best Western Hotels. We're very fortunate to have with us today Monty Gardner, who is the VP of E-commerce and Business Intelligence. And he's going to tell you a little bit about the story of Best Western, where they came from, and where they are today, and how they've been able to accelerate a lot of their business transformation. So, Monty? sir. And for you.
Thank you, Greg. So Greg introduced us as the mature partner. I think that was the kind way of saying something. It's really a pleasure to be here today and talk to you about this really important topic. And I think we're going to try to cover a fair amount of ground. I'm going to take a few minutes to familiarize you or refamiliarize you with Best Western, or BWH Hotels, as we prefer to be known today. We'll talk a little bit about kind of a prevailing attitude and methodology to technology that prevailed a couple of decades ago, and how what we're seeing right now is kind of a shift away from that and really a response to that. We'll talk about the transformative power of business intelligence and the role that that's played in my company's transition. And we'll also give you a sneak preview of our first cloud-native app. Sound good? Okay, good. We'll get started. So, for many of us, our first exposure to a brand like Best Western came when we were kids, right? You know, maybe our family decided to go on a road trip, and they put us in that station wagon, and off they went on a long journey of interminable length. And that was certainly the case as I was growing up, and I had lots of siblings, and that all I know is that car got smaller and smaller, and it got more difficult and more difficult with each passing mile. But luckily along the way, there were these little oases, these little stops, these hotels where we would kind of get a little respite from that car. And what I remember most about that was splashing in the pool, freshly laundered towels, and fun with my family in a kind of an intimate setting that wasn't the car. So for me, it's really about that experience, and that's what the brand represents in my mind. Now, in those days, there wasn't a lot of technology to speak of in the hotel, right? I mean, there was some, not as we understand it today, but over the years, technology certainly crept into the way that we took reservations, crept into the way that we managed those reservations when the guests were in-house, and also into the various ways that the hotel needs to be run in terms of operations. Whether it was housekeeping, whether it was keeping the books, eventually technology definitely came into play. Now, in the case of Best Western, in the mid-90s, we had the idea that we were going to go out and buy and kind of build out our own reservation system. So we made that decision, and in those days, we were an Oracle shop through and through, and like any company that has a desire to build a transaction processing system at scale, we had built all of our business logic directly into that database. That's just how it worked. And as soon as you came to that decision that you were going to support proprietary technology, immediately it became clear that you needed to have a data center. And so what did Best Western do? Well, back in kind of the years predating this central reservation system, we bought land in Phoenix, northwest side of town, and we started building out an operation slash data center. 120,000 square foot facility, complete with a 400,000 gallon underground cooling operation, and all of the accessories that go with that. This was a critical point in time, because at this point in time, Best Western became kind of unavoidably, perhaps unwittingly, in a part of kind of the hardware maintenance business, right? We veered off from what kind of, you could argue, should have been our core competency. And we started making decisions about how much hardware we needed, what our peak capacity was, what our seasonality called for. We were kind of gathering infrastructure to plan for that peak date that came once a year. And that was really inefficient. Think about it, it's kind of like going on a vacation, but paying for that vacation every single day of the year, but only getting to actually experience that vacation once. And so it's really kind of a waste of resources, but it was absolutely necessary at the time. So anyone that has ever tried to analyze kind of a hotel or hospitality kind of technology stack in a two-dimensional plane has kind of built one of these charts, right? This should look very familiar to you. And it's quite a challenge, right? All those lines representing interfaces and points of integration. The thing that you realize as you kind of study that diagram after you create it is, number one, that's kind of hard, but number two, it's kind of a tangled web, and it's also kind of a delicate system. Each time you add something new to that system, it becomes more complex and more complex. And you're also aware, as a technology leader, I think, that the addition of that new application or that new workflow or that new data set is going to potentially dilute your team's focus, right? And it could also kind of upset the delicate balance that keeps the whole thing kind of working and running. So, and as soon as you realize that, that can have a very chilling effect on innovation. And we tend to adopt more of a defensive posture. We tend to kind of protect what we have versus trying to do new things and taking risks. It's often easier to just maintain what you have and play it safe. And so this is my central argument that back in the day, Best Western and many other organizations were playing it safe. We weren't going on the offensive. We were kind of playing defense. And to me, that runs completely counter to our goal in the business. So I don't think any of us wants to play defense. We aspire to do big things that matter. We want to enable business outcomes, not stand in the way or become an obstacle. And so when you realize that, you realize you need to do whatever you can to eliminate complexity. We never wanted to be in the hardware business, but again, it was kind of necessary at the time. And we would argue now that we shouldn't be, now that we have other options. So it would be better for Best Western and companies like us to take those resources that we would apply towards that infrastructure and redirect it to doing what fits within our core competency, helping hotels run, taking care of guests, and so forth. So in 2018, we began kind of this multi-year process of transitioning to the cloud and decommissioning our data center. And this was a really pivotal moment in time because what it represented was the end of a 30-year era for us. 30 years of maintaining that data center and kind of shouldering that burden. And this was also the point in time where I would argue we stopped playing defense and started going on offense. And the poster child that I'll talk about is kind of this new cloud-native revenue management system that we have recently built. So, like many strategies, they can look good on paper, but they don't always work out in practice. And I think when you talk to the team, they talk about two different categories of hurdles that you'll encounter. Some are technical in nature, and some have to do with people. And the second category, the people, tends to be the more intractable of the two. Honestly, because we are a mature company, Greg, and we have people that have long tenure and they're essentially wed to certain applications, to certain processes, that makes the job even more difficult. If we were starting afresh, like Jeff, maybe it would be a little bit easier, you could argue. But even then, I'm sure that presents a whole different set of challenges. So the other thing that you find is when you're ready to make that transition, you have to justify it. You have to convince the people that control the purse strings. And you can talk to them about kind of these abstract things about reducing the complexity or disaster recovery. And some of those things can be hard to grasp if you're the CFO or someone who's helping you make that decision, make that investment. What really helps is if you have something tangible that they can really understand. And in our case, that tangible thing was business intelligence. So like all executives, I would argue all executives understand the need for information. Right? And as it turns out, that's one of the fundamental benefits of moving to the cloud. The siloed data, you can start aggregating it from all corners of the organization. So in 2018, and we have some folks here in the audience that were pioneers in this, that we built our data lake and we started building it out. And that was fortuitous timing because a couple of years later when the pandemic hit, we already had kind of this pipeline for delivering information and dashboards, and we were cranking them out rapidly. When the pandemic hit and everything was changing so quickly, we were well positioned to react to those changes. And it was our executives that benefited, but I would argue more importantly, it was at the unit level with our individual hoteliers where we made the greatest difference. So in our world, we have three groups of folks that we cater to, three different constituencies that need different types of information. The reality is all the information is kind of the same. It's just you're looking at it from a slightly different angle, sometimes a little more granular, sometimes a little bit more in aggregate. And you're looking to answer questions about where should I place my bets? Where should I make my investments? Are my strategies working? How will I know? And what am I going to do next? And so, these are the three types of groups. They all have their own questions, and the data empowers us and rewards those that are intellectually curious to go after and find the answers to those questions. And that was definitely something that our executives understood. And to their credit, they opened those purse strings and allowed us to go ahead with the project. So now, what do you do next? What do you do for the encore? In our case, after we had kind of demonstrated the power of this data and how it made us more effective, we did ask, what is next? That's the natural thing to do. In our case, we found a willing partner in our revenue management team. Revenue management, fancy word for setting rates, setting your pricing. And that's a discipline where timely, accurate data is very important. You can't operate off of stale data. You have to have really good data, and it has to come from multiple sources because that's how you're going to make the best recommendations. So for years, kind of the background here is we had rented our revenue management software from a third party, and there were definite benefits to that partnership. I'm not trying to disparage it in any way. It was a great partnership for us at the time. But as we kind of moved on, we started having thoughts of, are we optimized? Is there more we can do now that we have the data literally at our fingertips? And so the foundation of any revenue management system is the forecast. It's that demand forecast that underpins everything. Okay? So what we did was we did a quick proof of concept to say, let's look at the demand forecast that our current system is producing. Let's see if we can build one that's even more accurate. And it didn't take us long to conclude that we could, in fact, build a model that was more accurate than what we had. And not only that, we could build multiple models, and actually quite quickly. So once we had that foundation in place, then the next step was, can we produce better recommendations? Those rates that the hotels are looking at in terms of where we're telling them they should set their rate, how credible are those recommendations? And again, we did some POC work and found that we could succeed in that area as well. Now, one of the really great benefits, again, is the timeliness of data. Well, anytime you're kind of you're introducing vendors, sometimes latency is a problem. That was the case here. But with the data literally right there, we could eliminate some of that latency and make sure that the decisions we were making were based on the freshest data possible. We also had less downtime, or we hypothesized that we could experience less downtime as we built this new system. And finally, that we would be able to kind of offer this system to all of our affiliates as well, not just to our hotels in North America. But the final point, it's number 6, I think is really the clincher, and that is that we would no longer be beholden to someone else. That we could, if we wanted to make changes, if we wanted to add new features or whatever, that we could do that, and we could do that on our own terms in a way that was totally custom to our business. So really compelling reasons to go this route. Now, here we are in 2023. We've actually launched this. We launched it in September to a small group of hotels. And these are just a few actual screenshots from the application. It's lightweight. It's, I think, aesthetically pleasing. You might argue that, but I think it's a beautiful baby. And but most importantly, it's functional, right? It does what it's supposed to do, and we control it. As of today, we've got about a little under 1,000 hotels using it. By the end of the year, we'll have all 2,400 hotels in North America using this. And this also sets the stage for us to deploy this internationally to our affiliate organizations as well. So really positive. Initial reviews are on track. Now, as we compare what we used to have back when we didn't have our own platform, there are really a couple things that stand out. Number one is anytime you're pushing data to a third party and asking them to use that data to do something, create a few workflows and give you back a recommendation, that's going to be problematic, to say the least. So there's just that latency component. There's also kind of this idea that there is a black box that is opaque to you and that you will never fully be able to understand or influence in the way that you perhaps might like to. And so these were the things, as we consider what we had, that we were trying to overcome. And now this is juxtaposed against what we have now. And this is really positive because, again, that foundation, when you look at that SageMaker component, is squarely embedded within our own our own wheelhouse. All of the inputs, all the lion's share at least, are coming from first-party data sources that are very fresh. There's no physical hardware. This has nothing to do with our data center. By the way, that data center is on its way out, I think, in a few months. We can add new features pretty much at will, right? If we can conceive of something, an enhancement that we want to see, we can certainly go after it. We no longer have that black box to concern ourselves either. So this is kind of a really compelling reason as to why we went this route. And this is a beautiful diagram, a lot prettier than the spaghetti. So the first time you do something, there will always be challenges, but considering what we've done and in what timeline it's been at, comparing fairly easy compared to what we perhaps would have thought. So, and we have built multiple ML models. We have a pick best feature that rides on top of them, and so we're really getting the best of many worlds as we seek to deploy this to the whole portfolio of hotels. Now, when we started, we had very little internal knowledge of SageMaker or Aurora or React, right? But essentially a year later, now we've got a team. This was a beautiful test case to see if we could do it. We've got a team that is now fully kind of immersed in cloud technology, and the next question is probably, what do we do for an encore? Now that we've done this one, what's next? And it's really exciting to be playing offense instead of defense for a change. So with this particular case, you always ask yourself, how are you going to measure success? And in our case, it comes down to two things: adoption and essentially efficacy. Adoption we measure in two ways: how many hotels are actually using the application, and that's a pretty straightforward thing to measure. But there's a second component to that as well. Remember, this is a revenue management system that makes recommendations. So what we also ask is, what percentage of our recommendations are being accepted? What is the probability that that thing that we recommended is actually being put into practice? And right now, about 3 out of every 4 recommendations that we make is actually being accepted, which is very high, considering that we've only just started out, and we still have a lot that we can do in order to improve that percentage. The other thing we want to look at is this is a voluntary system. You don't have to use it. So what we'll do over time is we aggregate enough data is to compare those hotels that are using the application to those that are not, and we're hoping to draw some comparisons about their financial performance. So pretty straightforward, right? But you always want to ask yourself with this, how are you going to measure success? And it's kind of easy to do that when you have all the data. Okay, so I'll just kind of bring it to a close now, and kind of recap what I see as Best Western's journey. Number one is, it would be really easy to continue to play defense, but I think if we find ourselves or our teams playing a lot of defense, we need to challenge ourselves to go on offense and not be complacent. We will encounter resistance from our teams. That resistance will come in multiple forms, whether it's upskilling or just folks' attitude to change. We should be prepared for that, right? The third thing that I would, again, leave you with is the promise of the cloud is really the data that it represents and the transformative power of that data. And finally, my final kind of argument is that the data, in many cases, will allow us to see what our true core competencies are and to pursue those. So thanks very much for your time. Greg, appreciate the opportunity and give it back to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Monty. We value your partnership, and we love collaborating with you guys to innovate on behalf of your customers, so thank you for being here. So now let's go to the other end of the spectrum. Let's look at a much younger company, Digital Native. It's a brand name that became very synonymous with many of us during the pandemic to have all of our food and other things delivered to our home. So I think a lot of you are probably familiar with the brand, but I think it'd be great to hear their story as well. They're kind of coming from the other end of the spectrum, but ended up kind of at the same place where they're now at a point where they can build using AWS native services for new applications. So with us today from DoorDash, we have Jeff Wan. He does a little bit of everything. He's Vice President of Engineering, Consumer, and Ads. So he does a little bit of everything at DoorDash. So thank you for being here. He's also a brand new father, has a new baby boy. So if he dozes off, just clap a lot and we'll keep him awake. So he's rushing back home tonight to his new son. So thank you for being here, Jeff. Oh, I didn't want to do that. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Greg, for that great intro about my professional position as well as my personal life. So I really appreciate it. And thank you all for being here with us today. I'd like to talk to you about DoorDash's platform transformational journey over the past 5 years or so. But before I do that, I'd love to take you through an overview of the business itself. So DoorDash is a technology company with a mission to grow and empower local economies by connecting consumers with their favorite local businesses. And the founding of DoorDash actually goes back 10 years, originating in this macaroon shop in Palo Alto, California. The 4 founders, who were all going to school at Stanford at the time, they were conducting interviews with local businesses as part of a class project at the time. And just as they were wrapping up this conversation at the macaroon shop, the owner mentioned that it was a real struggle to fulfill deliveries. And in fact, she had to turn down a number of orders because of that. And this same theme was prevalent in many of the subsequent conversations. And ultimately, this insight was what led to the founding of DoorDash itself, to provide a local, on-demand delivery service for merchants. Now, what began 10 years ago in one city is now, today, a global business in over 25 countries. And in the past quarter, over 540 million orders transacted on DoorDash. Now, in alignment with our mission, DoorDash supports economic activity in thousands of cities around the world, and on behalf of these 3 groups of customers. Consumers, probably the category we're most familiar with, because like you and I, we benefit from DoorDash's convenience of being able to order from the physical world at the touch of a button at our fingertips. For merchants, DoorDash provides this channel to connect with a highly engaged set of consumers and drive incremental demand and incremental sales. And for Dashers, who are critical in that they make the physical delivery between merchants and consumers, they benefit from the earning opportunity that's on DoorDash, where they can choose when, where, and how much to work. So with these these categories of customers, rather, they don't just exist in isolation on our platform, but they actually benefit each other or one another and the platform itself from their interactions. And we think about these as 3 powerful virtuous cycles. So as we have more merchants, including national favorites and local heroes on DoorDash, this generates additional selection for consumers. And with that, consumers engage more with us, which then feeds back into more sales for both existing merchants as well as attracting more new merchants onto the platform. This is the local network effect. Concurrently, as more orders overall take place on DoorDash, this leads to higher earning potential for our Dasher population. And this, in turn, attracts additional Dashers who want to join the platform. This leads to overall faster and more efficient fulfillment orders and deliveries. And both of these effects together increase the brand affinity of DoorDash as a platform, which ultimately benefits the consumers, merchants, and Dashers, and also generates greater economic activity for each of the communities that we serve. Now, whether we're delivering features for each of our constituencies or building the platform itself, technology has been at the center of DoorDash. And we've been a cloud-native company, as Greg mentioned, from the very beginning, partnering with AWS from day one, and as well as every step along the way over the past 10 years. But in 2019 through early 2020, we were at this inflection point for both our business as well as our tech platform. Our core restaurant food delivery segment was continuing to grow very rapidly. And at the same time, we were starting to see some new segments that start to pop up. For example, our grocery business was starting to be seen, and our convenience business. So both of these things combined put a lot of stress onto our tech platform, which hasn't really changed all that much over the life of the company up to that point. We were starting to see some problems in terms of outages, and we were also starting to slow down a bit from our internal development. So this was our moment when we needed to think about transforming our platform in a major way, not just to solve these problems that we're already seeing, but really to set us up for success far into the future for the new stage of growth. Accidentally skipped forward one slide, but wanted to talk about, as we're thinking about this transformational journey that we needed to take, we had these three broad goals in mind. The first and the most important among them is reliability. We can't operate as a platform if we aren't online and available for our customers, as each minute of downtime meant loss of convenience for our consumers. It meant loss of sales and business for our merchant, and the loss of earning opportunities for our Dasher audience. So that was paramount. We also needed to be able to scale our business in real time because demand can go up and down very rapidly. So we needed to be able to scale horizontally, but at the same time, we needed to do so very efficiently. And then finally, we wanted to be able to still to move fast. Something which we pride is being able to bring ideas to the market very, very quickly. And once they are working, be able to deploy them globally. So that's kind of the elasticity aspect, that flexibility aspect, that we wanted to have. So these were our goals in going on this journey, and I'm going to talk to you a bit about some of the war stories, case studies, as well as what actually happened on this journey. As I mentioned before, reliability is simply our number one feature as a platform. And we think about the goal in reliability as this metric called order uptime. What that meant was the percentage of orders that can actually be transacted on the platform as intended by our customers. We have that as 99.95, 3.5 nines. And that was, to be fair, a very, very aspirational goal in 2019. We were not close to this. In fact, we were starting to suffer a lot of outages. We were starting to not be as available to our customers as we'd liked. And also internally, connected to that, we were starting to slow down in our feature development. So not where we wanted to be. And the root cause of that is in our architecture at the time. So we had a monolithic system or service that was being connected to one single, very large RDS, Aurora RDS instance where all of our data was at. And the connection between them was this ORM system. Now, for many of you in the room, you may have experience and be able to spot why there might be a problem over here, especially as the company was growing very rapidly. For example, single points of failure with all of the code being together and only a single database. The ORM system, which may be fairly magical and help early on, was starting to generate a lot of inefficient database queries that was simply bottlenecking the database layer. So these were just a couple of root causes, but a lot of problems behind it. And we really needed to aspire toward that goal and redesign our platform foundationally to get to where we needed to be. But throwing a wrench into that plan in early 2020 was the pandemic. And you can see in this chart of total orders by quarter that between Q1 of 2020 and Q2, it simply doubled, and it continued to go up very rapidly. And this, as you can imagine, was putting a lot of stress in a situation that was already very stressful from a tech platform perspective. But I also want to highlight it wasn't just a challenge and difficulty for us, but an even bigger challenge for our customers. So at the time, as you recall, for merchants, the dine-in business was, for restaurants customers, it was shut down. And they were relying on delivery solutions as a lifeline for their business. As Greg also mentioned earlier, for us, for consumers, the new normal was staying at home a lot, and we needed to find a way to adjust to that and to sustain, feed ourselves in this new normal. And then for our Dasher customers, they still depended on DoorDash to earn a living, and there was a lot of concern around health and safety. So more than a challenge for us, we needed to actually come together and actually deliver a lot of features to help our customers out. And the only way forward is to come together as a team and to tackle this head on. There was no other choice. And the way that we tackled this was through this threefold approach. So the first squad that we had, we simply called the feature squad. And their mission was to deliver the critically needed features for our customers as quickly as possible. So some examples here were that for our merchant customers, we had a queue of tens of thousands of merchants who wanted to get onto our platform, but they were simply being backlogged because of our queue. So our team needed to find ways to do automation, to be able to reduce that queue, to be able to simply get merchants onto our platform so they can start generating business and to keep their businesses alive. For our dashers and consumers, we implemented features such as contactless delivery, something that's very well known today that we take for granted. But at the time, this allowed us to have deliveries take place safely without having to necessarily meet face-to-face. So that was a big thing for them. And overall, this squad was really heroic in not just delivering these two features, but an entire year worth of engineering features, in fact, in a month and in fact weeks. And they had to do it on our legacy platform that I described, which was very brittle, right? So a big challenge there. The second squad was also doing a big task. This is our firefighting squad. And they were tasked with really extending the lifeline, the capacity, the headroom of our legacy platform that I described before is already kind of teetering. And this is where we benefited tremendously from our partnership with AWS. I remember very clearly that we actually sat together on the same call with the Aurora engineering team on a Friday afternoon. This is when we have the highest number of orders. This was our peak. And they were really helping us with taking a look at our database, which was a bottleneck in terms of where the slow queries were coming from, where maybe within the guts of the system, there may be optimizations or patches they could backport for us that would be able to help relieve some bottlenecks. So that was a really heroic effort of not just our team coming together, but with the AWS team. And that was repeated in a couple other instances with other infrastructure teams. So that was tremendous. And this firefighting squad was simply working every day to find new optimizations, new areas where we could optimize, to really buy us time to re-architect our system and buy us time for this third squad, which I call the architecture squad. And they were tasked with designing and implementing the systems that were going to fast forward us into the future. But they had to work, they didn't have the luxury of working slowly. They had to work with deliberateness, but also with urgency. And fast forward a couple of years, that threefold approach definitely gave us a lot of mileage in taking us far and was able to get us to this year, 2023, where we have an entirely different landscape of the platform today. So I'll call out a few differences in this new platform that we have and contrast that with the 2019 version. The first one was, instead of a monolithic system, we have a service-oriented architecture where the services are grouped by domains. So this allows us to have the ability to scale each area up and down, no single points of failure there, and allow our teams to be able to move quickly because each of the teams working on a particular domain can control their own destiny in their development cycle. So that was a huge plus. And along the same lines, we no longer have one single database for all of our data, but we segregated it by the different domains. And we've also introduced different data stores to be able to give us that flexibility to, depending on the data type and access pattern, have the right data store to fit that pattern. So that included, obviously, the traditional tried and true Aurora RDS, but also Cassandra and CockroachDB, all hosted on AWS instances still. But that was also tremendous for us in getting that optimization for the particular data type that we needed, but also, again, more isolated than before. And then finally, this piece, which I'll call the cell architecture, was that we have multiple copies of our entire stack where each independently can serve customer API requests. So this gave us a lot of benefits in the form of, one is isolation, two is just redundancy, and then three, it allows us to be able to mitigate failure and outages very quickly. So for example, sitting in front of these, in this diagram, these 4 cells is a load balancer that can load balance traffic depending on the IP address of the request or other characteristics. And if we're detecting in, let's say, cell 1 here, some failure of request, we can just dynamically route the request to the other cells and be able to go on and serve the customer request. And because of the features of this new architecture, we were in fact able to arrive and in some cases actually exceed our goal of 99.95% order uptime for the entirety of this year so far. So not done yet with what we wanted to achieve, but definitely a significant milestone compared to where we were before. And really, this gave us the ability, as Monty was saying earlier in his presentation, to play offense instead of playing defense, being afraid we're going to take an outage. So that was tremendous. But one question that may be on your mind as I was just describing this cell architecture was, well, sounded like you guys achieved some reliability, but you were scaling out with a lot of instances to achieve it. So is it the case that you got reliability, but it was very, very costly, right? That might be a question that's on your mind. And I'll say that yes and no. At the very beginning, in fact, we did scale out quite a bit to prove that this architecture actually worked. We needed to make it work before we thought about anything else. But once we got the confidence that this was working well, we really were able to focus on this efficiency part and really, really bring the cost down. And we were able to do that because of the tooling from AWS native as well as the partners that gave us a lot of introspection into where we have opportunities to be able to get that efficiency, right? So that tooling was just key for identifying the opportunities. And with that, we were then able to drill down into individual areas and be able to then tune the different levers that were at our disposal to get those efficiencies. So this graph here is kind of a pie chart of the different areas where we got the efficiency gains. The biggest chunk here, which I'll highlight, is our usage of spot instances to be able to apply those to non-real-time workloads, such as, let's say, a data workload, or an instantaneous workload, such as building a package, building a service for deployment. So those were really benefited from this much more economical model of the spot instances, where we got a lot of mileage. Another example that I'll share is with our real-time services, we were able to apply auto-scaling such that we don't have to provision at this sustained high level, but instead we can scale up and down depending on the API requests coming in from the customers. So that was a huge, huge win for us and allowed us to be able to get that reliability that I talked about without it being very costly. And in fact, through a lot of these optimizations, we were able to achieve some of the lowest cost per incremental order in the history of the business. So finally, moving to this other quality that I mentioned at the beginning, which is flexibility, right? Like we were able to improve our robustness of the system and doing it efficiently, but we still wanted to be very agile and be able to go to market very quickly with new ideas. And the example that I'll talk about here is the way that we rebuilt our call center business, also as a result of the pandemic. So before the pandemic, our call center staff were all sitting co-located in one location. But then we had to adapt to this world where it's highly distributed, 100% distributed. And in that process, we rebuilt a lot of our software solution there. And we were able to take advantage of a couple of key foundational building blocks on AWS. One is Connect, which is a ready-to-be-used solution for call routing, call center, which helped us to get started really quickly, but also has a lot of customizability in terms of Lambda functions, workflow manager, that allows us to continue to layer on additional complexity and optimization on top of it. The other piece is Lex, which is a conversational AI bot that lets us have this natural language processing on the call, getting our customers to the right support agent much more quickly and more naturally. And a combination of these drove some really, really impressive business outcomes in terms of improving our first contact resolution. As I mentioned before, it also went to go to market very, very quickly. And both of these led to a lot of savings for the business overall. And also, it would be remiss for me to not mention that it was also highly reliable in terms of being very solid for that part of the business. So as I wrap up this discussion of our platform transformation journey, I want to sum up with a few thoughts. The first thing for me when just thinking through this whole journey as a whole was when you undergo on a big transformation, or maybe not even a transformation, but just a large project, really important for me to start working backwards from the needs of the customer in terms of deriving what you want to get out of it. So for us, this was reliability as our number one feature. This was elasticity of being able to get to that scale, but doing it efficiently. And this was also about that flexibility of being able to move quickly still and pilot ideas very, very quickly. So that was kind of, for us, the attributes that we really wanted and the goals that we wanted to set. Once you have the goal, obviously, you have to develop a robust plan. But at the same time, be aware that you may have to adapt the plan on the fly. For us, this was the pandemic, right? Really, it forced us to adapt and be very agile. But it doesn't have to be something so dramatic. It can be simply having a feedback loop of taking your learnings as you're executing on it back into the goal-setting process. And the third thing here that I'll highlight is not about technology, but really about people. We had to really come together as a team and have this one team, one fight mentality that I talked about in this 3 squads approach of everybody needed to be aboard for us to have that success, to overcome a lot of challenges. And then also, it may be very daunting at the beginning when you're looking at perhaps a new architecture, perhaps a really large goal, but never underestimate the compounding effect of simply getting 1% better every day. Just getting a little bit closer to your goal every day, and over the medium to long term, this will pay really, really large dividends. When thinking about next what we want to do, or currently what we're doing, AI is clearly a big area that we're exploring, both in terms of internal use cases to further our productivity, as well as delivering fantastic features on behalf of our customers. And we really continue to count on AWS as a very, very strong partner on our continued journey. I want to conclude by thanking the DoorDash team for all of the tremendous impact, and I'm lucky to be able to represent in this room today. And then also, huge thanks to the AWS team for the very, very strong partnership over the past 10 years, and also continuing into the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So, quick question, Jeff. How many times have you had to have a DoorDasher bring you an emergency pack of diapers so far?
Definitely a few times. Definitely a few times.
You know, Amazon.com does have a subscription option, so.
But this is ours is real time. You can get it within the hour. So.
Okay. So we thought these were 2 really good stories to kind of draw the compare and contrast of how these 2 customers took a different path, but they're both at a point now where they're able to accelerate transformation, they're able to accelerate innovation, and as you heard from both of them, get great IT efficiencies and business benefits because they're on AWS and able to build and innovate on using AWS services. So just a couple of wrap-up points I want to make and offer up some artifacts that you can take away to kind of look at how you can leverage some of this in your own business when you go back home. But also later this week, we've got T&H Tuesday and Thursday, we're calling it. So we have a lot of sessions going on today. In addition to this, on this afternoon, if we rush back to the Venetian, we've got a lightning talk from Choice Hotels about how they've recently done a proof of concept around our new unified profile for the traveler and guest on AWS solution. We've also got a session with 2 more Chalk Talks coming up as well. With the optimized travel hospitality operations and building a digital concierge. And then on Thursday, we also have our travel colleagues doing a session at MGM for a travel breakout session as well. So if you haven't already registered for those, look at them. There's still walk-up availability for all of these. So make sure you check all these out because it's all really good sessions that's shown in the context of travel and hospitality customers. Now, 3 other artifacts I want you to take away with you today. We sponsor a big research project with Skift every year to look at kind of where we are as an industry with digital transformation. Our latest version for 2023 was published at the end of June. Good, fresh, really relevant data. If you're looking to build a business case to accelerate your own digital transformation, there's some great data points in this study that I think you can use in building that business case. We're seeing a lot of our customers able to justify bigger budgets to support a lot of this work, supporting the acceleration of their digital transformation. Next, much like the stories you've heard about today, if you're sitting here and you are just starting to embark on your migration, or you're looking how to accelerate your migration to get to the point of modernization like these 2 customers, these other 2 QR codes are for migration journey ebooks that we produced over the past year. There's one for accommodation and lodging. There's one for restaurants customers. But it basically is several case studies and stories that talk about the different paths customers have taken to get through their migration quickly and to really start reaping business benefits and IT benefits as soon as they can. So with that, we'll close out. I think we're about 5 minutes early, so we'll hang around if you have questions for myself or either of our speakers. Do make sure you try to get back down to the Venetian for that next lightning talk with Choice Hotels. And also make sure that on the app, you're going to get pinged to do a customer satisfaction survey for this session. Please take the time to do that, because it's that feedback that really help us plan for all of these sessions for next year's reInvent. And hopefully we'll see you later this week and again next year. So thank you very much.